Chris and Mike Hansen are brothers, and they have this awesome new technology that will help children from preventing them from suffering from concussions. So with that, I want to introduce you Chris Hansen and Mike Hansen.
Morning, everybody.
Morning.
So we'll run through the deck presentation really quick, and it's sort of a fairly technical concept when you get down and deeper than just the surface. But I think that after we go through this, you should be able to understand kind of what the product is, what the market looks like, what the opportunities are, and hopefully how we can help each other go forward. So, one of the taglines that we do a lot when I do presentations is I ask the loaded question, where is a child safer? In the back seat, properly restrained in the back seat of a modern sedan in a 40-mile-an-hour frontal impact, or falling 8 feet onto a playground? And so, given those two options, most people do pick the car. But surprisingly, that's the case, that your child is safer in the backseat of that car with respect to closed head injury, brain injury. And that's really what it is that we're trying to not eliminate, but lessen the severity of and lessen the likelihood that a child in a recreational environment, either organized or kind of free play like a playground, is less likely to be exposed to the type of impact and forces that would cause perhaps a lifelong debilitating brain injury. So, as it states here, over 2,000 children in the United States every year go to the emergency room as a direct result of injuries. Yeah, 200,000, sorry. Go to the emergency room as a direct result of an injury at a playground. Almost 80%, actually 79-point-something% of these are as a direct result of falling onto the playground surface itself. It's not entrapment, it's not strangulation or anything. So some really good research has just come out in the last 3 to 4 months. The Centers for Disease Control did a longitudinal study between 2001 and 2013 where they dug down into the injury database that's compiled through all of the emergency rooms across the country. And what they were able to find is that where a concussion, either mild or severe or significant, was the primary diagnosis, it accounted for 21,000 incidents every single year. Not necessarily a follow-up study, but one that was done contemporaneous to that with some of the same members at CDC and other research physicians, was published about 3 weeks later in the Journal of the American Medical Association. And the interesting thing about that is that they said the vast majority of these playground-related head injuries or injuries in general were not being recorded because the primary point of diagnosis was not the emergency room. It was the pediatrician's office. It was the immediate care facility. So that injury data did not go into the master database. So using those numbers, the 21,000 all of a sudden jumps up to 95,000 plus. Moderate to severe brain injuries are occurring every single year, and this is as a direct result of a child falling and hitting their head on the surface of a playground, because that's what they filtered for. And yeah, I mean, a lot of people say that the seeming increase in brain injuries, concussions in children can be attributed to greater public awareness. If you're a football fan, obviously everybody knows about what's going on in the NFL and sports in general, that there's an increased awareness. And that's true, but it doesn't really diminish the fact that it's an issue. Just because we know it's happening now more so than when we were kids. There's a lot of people tell me, oh, well, back in the day when I was a kid, we played on asphalt with broken glass and, which is true, because I was there too, as well, right? And it may explain a lot of why I'm doing what I'm doing right now. The industry standards do actually contribute to injuries, surprisingly. The testing standard that is used within the playground industry, and specifically dealing with the playground industry, but it also bleeds over into the athletic sports field industry, so synthetic turf. It's the standard is it's through ASTM, which is the American Society for Testing and Measurement, and the specific designation is F1292. Not that that's really important, but it's a lab type of test that they tried to convert into field use. So if you look at the type of equipment and the type of requirements that they make you go through in order to try and test to see whether your specific surface is compliant with any applicable standard, it's so onerous that it's never done. From a price point perspective, if you look at municipalities, school districts and park districts, their budgets get squeezed every single year. They're kind of forced to do more and more with less every single year. So, you know, the purchase price for the test equipment that's currently specified under the standard, as you can see here, it's $15,000 up front. You have a factory training cost of $3,000 a person, and you have to send it back every single year for recalibration at about $2,000, and it's about a month and a half turnaround. And like I said, because of these financial constraints, most people who own or operate playgrounds or athletic fields, they just simply don't test them. They use the eyeball test, which is not really good. And by contrast, if you looked at the automotive industry, over the years, that's where the vast majority of the data comes from. They spend hundreds of millions of dollars every single year crashing, you know, cars into concrete barriers. And that's really where the majority of the medical data and what they call the risk curves come, so that you can assess what force of impact is going to potentially impart what type of brain injury or, you know, long bone injury. Those are also tracked as well.
So we're actually past the 6-minute mark, but I'm going to let Chris keep going. But that was 6 minutes.
Oh, wow.
But go ahead. I want to hear about the technology.
I should talk quicker. Okay. So again, parents and playground owner-operators really do need an effective way to assess what the condition of their field is or their system. Because if you look at the cost of a lot of the modern playground surface systems in your particular neighborhoods, perhaps, it can go up to $70,000 or $100,000 to have one of these unitary surfaces put in. And without the ability to know from day one whether or not that's compliant, you have no idea what you've just purchased. More to the point, if there's a warranty associated with it, you don't know, because you don't have any data, whether or not you have a claim against the manufacturer to come out and fix a surface that's not functioning. So our answer to this whole thing is the ST Impact Analyzer. And it's an easy-to-use, affordable device. $3,500 is our MSRP. And the way it works is quite simple. This is the package. It's a complete package right here. It comes with a pre-programmed tablet with the user interface app on it and a head form, which correlates to a 50th percentile 6-year-old child, which is kind of the intended use scenario. That's the target group you're going after. So you turn the tablet on, you turn the head form on, you go out to your surface, you drop it from wherever you want at whatever height you want. Let's say you want to determine off of a elevated platform exactly what the condition of that surface is, because that's where children are likely to fall. It's simple. You could get in and out of a playground in 10 minutes with that. Whereas with the other technology, the existing test equipment, you'd be setting it up for half an hour before you even performed one drop. So on to kind of the meat of the matter. The market analysis, this is rough estimates, and you know, it's a new product, it's a new market, we don't have an awful lot to go against. We figure that at full market saturation, we're probably 900 to 1,200 units per year sales in perpetuity, but there are secondary streams of revenue associated with that. There's an annual recalibration fee. There is also a master database that we're looking to establish with all impact tests from across the country. That'll be a subscription service that people can sign up for on a monthly basis. Sort of where are we now? We've got all our brand name trademarks, and we've been issued our provisional patent. The final patent is about 6 to 9 months out, according to our attorneys. We've achieved significant cost reductions from our original beta versions. Year to date, we've shipped 55 test units around the world. We've established 3 wholesale distributors domestically, and well, 2 domestically, 1 up in Canada, and we're in conversations with people in Singapore and Israel.
We also ship the unit to Australia.
And we also ship the unit to Australia as well. Key sales right now, we just closed a deal with Disney Corporation to establish a pilot program at Disney World down in Florida, where they're going to implement it into their regular maintenance schedule. From there, it will migrate to all of their other properties. City of San Diego, the Canadian Playground Safety Institute actually is selling through these units for us up in Canada. The nice thing is that the standard that determines surface condition both in playgrounds and athletic fields is universal. It you know, from one country to another, because you know, the basic science is the same. So basically, what do we need? Short answer is money. $90,000, and this is, you know, as close as we can get to an estimate. It allows us to fully pay down the legacy development cost that we've incurred over the past 3 years. Developing something like this from scratch, especially on the software and hardware configuration side, it's not inexpensive. And the patent, yeah, I forget about the attorneys, yeah. The attorney's fees are fairly significant. The biggest problem we run into right now is our inability to pre-fund production runs, to be honest with you, because it's that initial cash outlay to go ahead and generate up 10 to 20 units, 30 units, 50 units, however many it might be, because when you're selling into municipalities, a great deal of time is spent with waiting to get the money back from them. They place the order, they have to receive the product, and then you're on a 30, 60, or 90-day payable schedule, which is, for a small company, kills you cash flow-wise. There are a significant number of additional markets that are available that we could open up for this base technology package, but again, the development cost is just above what we're able to handle right now. And you can see at $130,000, we can invest in additional tooling and drop our cost of goods sold by almost 50%, and at $160,000, it would enable us to generate the next or produce the next generation of technology. So that is it. I could go through a quick demonstration of the device, or yeah, sure.
We just actually let him go through the whole program because we don't have a second speaker today. But you know, you can see how quick 6 minutes goes
Yeah.
when you're trying to get everything involved. And I just want to make one observation. You went through all the data, the statistics about head injuries and stuff like that. In my experience, people are either going to accept it or reject it. So the addition of more information is superfluous.
Right.
You know? So you want to get through your program, get through as much as possible.
Yeah.
And that would be my only comment. But
Okay.
I think it was excellent.
No, totally fair.
Presentation. So let's give him a hand of Now let's open it up to questions. Start the questions.
How did you guys get into this?
That's an interesting, very interesting question. I've been in the playground servicing industry for about 15 years, and one of the projects that I've been focused on for the last 6 years is through ASTM, which is the governing organization. I've been working on a project to revise the current standard, to bring it more in line with current medical knowledge. It's about 20 years old. They use very old data. And about halfway through that, about 3 years ago, I just sort of came in my mind's eye, I just said, it really doesn't matter what we do with the standard because nobody is testing out in the field because of the cost and the difficulty associated with it. So I had some conversations with my brother, who luckily is a lot smarter than I am, and he's the technical side of our equation. And we just started spitballing ideas as to what we could do conceptually to develop something that would be easier to use and more affordable. So it came as a direct result of that.
You know, when I first was introduced to this by my brother and his old boss, who was our business partner, but for reasons he had to leave the company. He went work for someone. Long story short, he had to leave the company.
It was amicable.
Yeah, it was completely amicable. His new employer wouldn't let him do this. So, you know, when I was presented with this idea, you know, first of all, I had no experience in, you know, playground, parks, recreation, none of that. My background's electrical power generation, petrochemicals, refining, that kind of thing, you know. But, you know, I think I have a pretty good technical mind. I know how to take in technical information and digest it and understand what, you know, what you're trying to do with it, standard specifications and all that. So I read the existing literature, saw the existing products, and, you know, I just couldn't figure out why this, two things. I couldn't figure out why the existing standard that they used to test playgrounds, the existing device, well, the former device, rather, why it cost as much as it did, and why there had been no improvements on it until over the last 15 years. I mean, the technology they're using, that our competitor uses, is 15 years old, and they have not done anything to improve it, right? And anybody knows, I mean, just with your smartphones and cell phones and television, just how quickly technology has moved in the last 20 years. So when I looked at the problem, I said, well, how can we take the most current technology out there and integrate it into a new device, right? Because, I mean, what we're doing here is really simple. We have an accelerometer. You know, anybody familiar with the Nintendo Wii?
Yeah.
Nintendo Wii's the little controllers. That's how they know what you're doing. They're loaded with accelerometers. So you know they're cheap, right? If they can sell a Wii for a couple $100 and they can pack it with all these sensors, you know the technology is relatively inexpensive. So I figured, how can we take that same kind of cheap technology, inexpensive technology, pack it into here, and use, you know, off-the-shelf commercial mobile technology to make it work, right?
So can you show it to us?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me set this up here.
Yes.
What does it tell you about the ground?
Well, what it measures is what's called impact attenuation. It's G-force distribution over time. So if you look at a head impacting the ground, right? Ideally, you want all of that energy to be absorbed by the surface, you know, in every force vector. So there's two components to it. There's absorption and dispersion, depending on whether it's a loose fill surface or a solid surface. So as you drop it, it measures those G-forces over time, and that gives you a number called an HIC, a head injury criteria. And a head injury criteria correlates to a sort of a degree of severity of brain injury based on something called an AIS, abbreviated injury score. So AIS 1 being the least significant on up to AIS 5, which is fatality. So at every level when you drop it, and this is the purely technical point, because if I told you it measured HIC and 1,000 was the current limit, nobody would really understand that. But if you take it back one step, 1,000 HIC actually correlates to a 16.7% chance of a severe to non-recoverable brain injury. That's lifelong debilitation. And it's not difficult to get that level of
In say 100 square foot play area, how many times would you test it? Like, do you do it every 5 feet?
we have a short form and a long form in terms of how we, basically our methodology is you go to the playground, you divide it into quarters, and randomly within what's called the use zone. So the use zone of the playground is 6 feet in every direction from kind of the central play equipment structure. And you would go and do random drops, no two of which would be closer than 5 feet. And it's determined by, you know, size. The average playground is obviously much larger than that, so it's scalable up or down. But there is a whole procedure that we developed to let you go in and get the most thorough analysis of how that surface is performing.
So you dropped to that and it came down to 18 point something. What does that mean?
Correct. So I just did a quick demonstration here with the device, just to show a few people how it works. So you power it up, you sync it to your tablet, any Android, where we're currently running an Android because it was a lot less expensive to develop than Apple iOS.
Yeah.
We get lots of inquiries about, oh, when are you going to have an Apple app? When are you going to have an Apple app? I'm like, well,
At some point.
yeah, when it doesn't cost as much. That's
Yeah,
when we're going to have
yeah.
it, or when there's more demand. So you power it up, you sync it up, and this is one of the things that really, really, really save us a lot of money in development and production. The current device, and a lot of the current devices have their own dedicated HMI, you know, human-machine interface, right? And that dedicated custom-built HMI probably costs $1,000. If anybody's familiar with how much custom electronics costs, it's a lot of money. I figured, well, with Bluetooth and with wireless and with mobile apps, why couldn't we just write an app on existing piece of hardware, right? Save us all that development time on an interface.
Right.
Plus, people can send emails and do all that fancy
Yeah,
stuff.
it's a standard tablet.
And this will eventually kind of tie into the whole database concept we want to do, which we'll get into a little bit later. But having a mobile platform like this really makes that a lot easier. So, what I did, I dropped it on this here, kind of simulating a playground surface, which it really doesn't. So what the device does, when it impacts the surface, those accelerometers measure how quickly your acceleration is changing, your g-force, right? And what it does is it records that, it plots a curve. Now, the formula you use to calculate HIC, remember, because HIC is a derived value. The formula used to calculate HIC looks at your entire impact curve and determines which is the largest portion of that graph relative to time. Everybody here familiar with integer calculus? So it's basically, you have your curve, and you're taking your integer. You're taking your area under that curve, the maximum area under that curve with respect to time. And that's what HIC is. HIC being a score you can correlate to probability of brain injury. So that's what that 25 up top. I know it's kind of difficult for you guys back there to see, but that's what that top number is. The second value of max value, that's your maximum deceleration in G's. And underneath that, we actually have a drop height and an impact velocity that is measured. So both these top two numbers, your HIC score and your max and your Gmax, those both have values per 12.9.
Within the standard, the existing standard states that your HIC has to be below 1,000 and your maximum G-force has to be below 200. So there are absolute standards against which you can test performance. But again, those are absolute numbers, but it's a relative standard because it can be at different heights.
But everybody saw how easy that was to do, right? How quickly that was. One person, one of the reasons I think we have a real advantage over our competitor is because their device, it takes multiple people to operate. It's a big rig. It's not like it's something you could take on a plane with you or easily transport it from spot to spot. For every one test they do in the field, including setup and teardown time, we could do 100. And that's not an exaggeration. We can get so much data out of this compared to the existing device that people are going to want to test more because it's so easy.
Right.
You could have a playground maintenance. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, mine was shifting gears a little bit, but about demand for your product.
Right.
Sounds like with the ASTM that you're creating a standard.
No, standard already exists.
Standard does exist.
You're not improving the standard?
There's ASTM is a difficult organization within which to work, and I've been a part of it for 10 years. Adoption of this technology into the existing standard is something that we are pursuing. It's very much an uphill battle, right? To get them to say, yes, we understand.
Would that help open up demand?
It would to a certain extent. The only advantage that would give us is that they would say, well, it's a certified suitable alternative. But the existing technology, they've had a stranglehold, a monopoly on that market for 2 decades almost. And there are a lot of ways within ASTM that you can derail efforts to, be more fair and inclusive. I'll put it that way to be nice. So, would it open up a significant market? Sort of, kind of, more on the technical wonk side of things, right? But the average person who is interested in doing an assessment of what their surface condition is, not just on a given day, but over a period of time, I don't think it's going to affect that market at all because that's where we're seeing the greatest degree of demand right now. For example, if you had a professional come in and do a playground safety audit on your playground, right? It's going to be anywhere from $750 to $2,000 for that man or woman to come in and test one day, one playground on one day. So with this, yeah.
Like experience with the automotive industry that you brought up, as well as the software industry, that the leaders are always trying to set the standard,
right,
so that your product meets those new standards, right? That you kind of
Outside,
current technology.
outside of the United States, this technology is accepted in every single standard that's out there.
Demand in your foreign markets are really.
Well, you know, the Canadian one, the standard in Southeast Asia, in Australia, there's not an issue, but sort of non-domestic. And ASTM is almost becoming an anachronism. Because their process is set up to allow for financially motivated people to drive the agenda, it's diminishing the relevancy of the information and the standards that are coming out of the organization. And that's from 10 plus years of personal experience working with them well before I started on this project.
You know, with respect to market, right? This isn't a market that we're trying to create. This is a market that already exists, and there's an underserved, and it's very much an underserved market, because the barrier to entry on the technology, with the exception of ours, of course, that's why we have it, the barrier to the cost of the current technology kind of prices a lot of people out of it, right? I mean, 30 years ago, how many people owned cell phones? Because they were not many, right? Because they were very expensive, and the subscription costs were high. But, you know, because people brought that barrier cost down, a lot more people got into it. Now, I'm not saying we're going to sell 1 million of these a year, but where our current competitor probably sells a dozen a year,
Right.
we could sell several hundred.
To 1,000. Well, we think, again, at full market saturation, the market would bear in perpetuity anywhere between 900 and 1,200 units just domestically in the U.S. And that doesn't.
We had a question.
I'm sorry, please.
Like getting the state or the county or the city to require these.
And that's, see, that is happening slowly. So we do have some adopters. City of San Diego, State Board of Utah actually has, there is a state law in Utah that requires that every public school playground has to have at least one safety audit performed every single year. So they bought half a dozen of our units for their safety inspectors to go out and perform these tests because they weren't testing the surface prior to that.
Yeah, that was my next question was, who's your market for this? I mean, are you going around doing the testing, or
No.
how do you get a professional quote-unquote tester, somebody that will do it properly?
See, here's the thing. The certification process for using this device, because it's so simple, it's about 10 minutes. I could show you how to use this device properly. Because of the way that the software and everything is set up, you can't dummy the results. It auto-calculates the drop height, so you can't take it someplace and drop it from a foot and say you dropped it from 8 feet. You know, there's no way to dummy those results back up. So the other technology, the other test platform, right? It's a 2-day course at $3,000 a person because it's so flippin' complicated to properly set this giant tripod up and get everything, you know. Who wants to do that? Technology is great, but if it's too difficult to use, you won't use it.
You know, and specifically to your point, there's certification out there, CPSI, Certified Playground
Safety Inspector.
Those are the types of people who would be using this. And a lot of you might not know what a CPSI is, but I guarantee you every single park district in the country has at least one
CPSI on staff. Yes.
So that's thousands of them.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so is the sales process geared more towards the CPSIs or specifically towards municipalities? Because it looks like you got both municipalities and larger
Yes.
organizations. So is there
The focus, right, the initial focus was that we opened up the marketing and sales of this to the CPSI market because the learning curve was so much shorter.
Right.
They understood it because they're the professionals, right? But then after that, starting to sell into individual municipalities, park districts and school districts, state organizations. Now with Disney, you know, a company who obviously, private operators, right? So the market itself, you know, is expanding. It's just we started with CPSIs because it was easiest to translate sort of what it was that we were trying to do to that market because they already had the base of knowledge. Yeah.
And remember, one of the driving forces behind sales on this and people wanting to use a device like this or needing to use a device like this, it's not the standard, right? It's going to be litigation.
Liability.
Liability protection, right? Because if you're owning and operating a playground right now, school district, whatever, somebody gets hurt, right? What's going to happen? You're going to get sued.
So David. Yeah, so
Right.
What's your projection? How do you see that market growing over time? How are you going to hit that channel and the sales? That to me is the big.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, right? So we incorporated in 2013, and the first 18 to 20 months was R&D. We sent out beta units to early adopters who did a lot of the field testing for us, right? They came back to us with feedback, said they like this, they don't like this, and we then developed an improved beta version, which then evolved into this, which is our production version. So,
And real quick, I just want to remind you, this was entirely self-funded, right?
2015 sales. What's 2015 sales?
2015 sales was $65,000.
What are you projecting first quarter
2017?
2017? And Disney, right? Disney, that's what's the maximum potential of Disney? Where are you at?
Well, yeah, honestly, for Disney, it's a single unit now to establish the protocol for their test program. As they roll it out into their theme parks and into all of their properties, it's not going to be $5 million worth of sales. It could be realistically $250,000 to $500,000 in sales to that one account, but it's the PR, you know, it's yeah, it's the early adoption. It's you know, people will follow that example.
But I think laying that story out over the next, I think would be strong.
Right. And honestly, what's limited us to date has been the fact that, you know, being completely self-funded, I mean, I'll tell you the truth. If I had 100 units, or let's just say if I had 10 units on any given day sitting on the shelf, ready to go, ready to ship, inventory is killing us because we have to aggregate orders in order to afford to pre-fund the production of the internal components. So there's two primary vendors. There's the vendor that manufactures the electronic assembly inside, the sensor array and the main circuit board. And there's the vendor who manufactures the actual head form. So between those two vendors, we have to come up with all the cash to pre-fund those sales. And if we're selling into municipalities, school districts and park districts, 9 times out of 10, they can't prepay. So that money has to come out of my pocket. So if I want to make 20 units, I got to pay for 20 units. And if I had units sitting on the shelf, I could open up our sales and marketing efforts, and I could move 10, 20, 50 times more product than we are right now, but I don't want to get too far over my skis to the point where we develop a reputation as somebody who promises the market something and can't deliver.
Bill? Yeah, so one of the concerns I would have is that if lawsuits are in fact the issue and the competitive product is the way they're going to test in a lot of lawsuits, how do you compare it to the competitive product? Have you done any?
We've done correlative testing between the two products.
How close to the?
It's plus or minus 5%, which is within the prescribed. ASTM has a standard for precision and accuracy, right? And for this particular test and this particular technology, it's plus or minus 10%. That's what they allow. We're within 5% one way or the other. So it's within the industry accepted margin of error.
So some lawyer's not going to blow you away by saying, well, compared to the one that's the industry standard, so to speak.
There's a lot of different ways to answer that. There's a really technical way to answer it that would, well, at any rate, the short answer is you cannot eliminate liability. You can limit it. And the ideal scenario for this product is that you go into an organization and you say, look, establish a proactive means of managing your risk, right? You test it every week. You test it every 2 weeks. Whatever that happens to be, now you have a verified record of actually going out and doing something versus waiting till the horse is out of the barn and then addressing the situation.
Jim, did you follow?
$780 to make these.
Yes.
And so you're saying that you're waiting until each time you get an order to kind of make them?
We're making them in batches because that's the only way it makes sense. I mean, a minimum of 20.
So if you were to make 20 and it's $15,000.
16 grand is what I have to come up with out of my pocket in order to fund 20 units, yes.
What's the lead time?
Lead time, 2 to 4 weeks, more or less. Yeah,
About that.
2 to 4 weeks.
Maybe another week for assembly.
Yeah, and then a final.
Considered like a micro loan or something that could build that batch for you?
We've considered a lot of stuff. We just started talking with Centir and People's Bank through Lori Felt has given us a hand there to trying to get a line of credit established. But again, it's a non-collateralized loan, so it's a little bit more difficult.
So how are you selling?
Right now, all of our marketing efforts, well, I mean, we do a lot of email, e-blasts right now, but it's networking and word of mouth, to be honest with you. I mean, I've been in the industry long enough that I know, I basically know everybody in the playground industry, both on the equipment and the surfacing side. I belong to the same organizations as these people. I network with them on a constant basis. That's how we're selling them.
So would it be, I mean, is it the kind, I mean, it's such a visual thing. I mean, is that, if you had the time and the money, could you drive around all these parks?
I could.
Drive right in a Munster, you could walk right in there. Look at this.
Well, here's a perfect example. Perfect example as to what some of the barriers are, right? So Munster, I've done 3 presentations for Munster. I've offered to go out and do, free safety audits of all of their playgrounds. And they're like, wow, that sounds like a great idea, right? Some people don't want to know what they don't know. The problem is that doesn't limit them from the liability exposure that is there. That's a real thing. So I haven't sold one to Munster, even though I've done 3 presentations to them.
And I know you know a board member at Munster Parks.
I do, and actually I do know a board member at the Munster Parks Department, but
Debbie?
This seems like a no-brainer for schools. I mean,
Yeah.
are you going into the schools and the playgrounds and?
to be honest with you, it's a time constraint issue, right? Because we're a small company, I'm not looking to staff up and have 20 different salespeople, full-time or part-time, on my payroll, which is why we're working on setting up distributorship. So if you look at the way the playground industry is structured, you have half a dozen major manufacturers who have sales reps everywhere, and they're talking to these schools and these park districts every single day. They have boots on the ground. I would rather distribute through them and handle my own separate marketing stuff to where I get full retail, because I'm not interested in staffing up and having to manage all of those people. I have an 8-year-old son. I don't have enough time to get in a car, to get on a plane every single week. If I could get in front of 100 people, I could close 50 deals. I know I could. There's just not enough hours in the day.
Chris, what does the ownership look like? I mean, what's the cap table? Do you guys still control 100% of the company?
We do.
50-50.
Yeah, 50-50.
Are you willing to give up a portion of it?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we understand that. We had another partner who, as Mike mentioned, had to leave because, it was a family obligation, new job type of situation, and he divested himself. The problem was he was our primary equity contributor. So now it boils down to trying to find money to fund operations, trying to find money to fund, not operations, but production primarily. I mean, I'm leveraged about as far as I can get leveraged. My credit card debt is pretty significant. And the one thing that I'm not willing to do is, sort of collateralize any sort of operating or production loan with my house, which is my last real asset, to be honest with you.
Based on a few of the things said between Bill and you all from, like, one of the issues is it's tight to, like, wait for municipalities to purchase.
Right.
Municipalities have some terrible ordinances.
Yeah, they do.
Have you considered, or what do you think of the idea of trying to sell to attorneys? Upfront purchase.
To be honest, it's not a market that I thought about. I mean, in terms of, I think it would be, I mean, look, I'll sell to anybody, to be honest with you, right? I mean, look, I'll tell you what, if anybody in this room has $3,500, you can take this unit home with you right now, and it's lightly used.
Eric, that is like the most interesting suggestion, I think. 'Cause I mean,
Then you can, demand payment before delivery. I think that's pretty
so we're going to have to start wrapping up. So last few questions. Anybody?
Real quick, just on your point about sales. One of our long-term income strategies ties in with this database, and you mentioned it, but kind of the idea with the database is every time somebody goes out here, out in the field, and drop it, with the new app we're developing, you have to enter what kind of surface you're dropping it on, how long that surface has been in operation for, what your ambient conditions are like. You have to enter in all this information, right? And we'll get performance, and they'll get performance data off those drops on that surface. Where does all that data go? It goes back to us, right? So we can develop this monumental amount of with respect to time, with respect to weather, with respect to use. And what can we do with that data? You can sell it back to people. Ultimately, the data is going to be more valuable than the devices. I mean, why do you think they give away free apps on smartphones? It's not because they like it when you play Candy Crush, because they're getting all that free data from you.
Back here.
It's a question, but really more of a feedback, I think. You could benefit from reaching out to parents and make them your brand advocates, because frankly, I think if you looked around and did some market analysis to find progressive communities where there was already a concern by parents, they would put pressure on school boards.
Yeah, the grassroots type of thing is really, really important. I don't know if anybody has ever tried to crack into the whole mommy blogger cabal, but it's they guard access to that resource very, very tightly. They don't open it up to just anybody. But I have made efforts to reach out to them.
What's the life of?
Well,
Good question.
two ways to answer that question. We don't know what the total life is, okay? So the product goes out, it's warranted for 1 year. They send it back to us. For $325, we refit it. Basically replace the battery, do some diagnostics. Maximum out-of-pocket expense for every unit that comes back to us is $75 against $325 in revenue. And then we extend the warranty an additional year.
If we had to replace every single item in here, that could break $175.
Right.
So even worst case scenario, we're making money on the service.
So to be honest with you, we've not had a unit that's been in use for more than 2 years right now. But I know I have a demo unit down in Texas right now that has over 3,000 drops on it, and there's never been an issue. And that probably represents 2 years of use.
I saw your prospective market go by after the ambulance.
Hopefully not. Hopefully not. I mean, I don't.
Last few questions.
I was just saying, like, maybe have you hooked up with some of the concussion clinics?
We have. I mean, again, it's a difficult market to get into, but yeah, I've collaborated with a lot of the sort of world-recognized leaders in concussion treatment protocol, specifically pediatric stuff, prior to this with the work that I was doing through ASTM. Not underwriting groups, yes, not specifically insurance companies, because I can tell you sort of logically that if you have a proactive approach to managing your risk, okay, that you're going to diminish that risk. Can I tell you to be 5% or 10%? No, I can't. I'm sure there are, insurance actuarials who probably could do the math on that. That's well above my head. But yeah, we have reached out to a number of underwriting groups to get that process started. Because if an insurance company came and said, well, we could hold your liability insurance constant or lower it if you put this program in place and here's a specific tool that you could use, then sales would be a lot easier, absolutely.
Real quick success story I want to touch on. So we sold one of these to a municipality out on the East Coast. They just purchased a brand new playground. Cost them $100,000 just for the surface.
Yes.
In their sales contract, it said, your surface must meet
These
ASTM 1290
performance requirements.
Meet these performance requirements. They take our device, they go out there, they drop it. Guess what? The surface failed.
On day one.
On day one. For $2,500.
35.
For $3,500, we saved them a $100,000 refit. Once that kind of story is replicated and spreads throughout other municipalities, they will be beating a path to our door to get this. $100,000 they saved by spending $3,500 one time.
Because I guarantee you that just using the eyeball test and your feet, you cannot tell the relative performance characteristics of a surface. It just can't be done.
Just an idea. Another one of your markets would be McDonald's. I was thinking about that the whole time
Yeah.
we were there with my sister's 3-year-old.
Yeah.
What if she falls? How bad would she hurt?
Because again, even though it's an indoor play mat, there are specific performance criteria that must meet. And it's the same technology.
Gymnastic studios.
Right. Well,
I mean,
that's what kids do.
market and even the application of this technology is
Right.
much
So,
bigger than this.
we're going to have to wrap up. But the last question we always ask at 1 Million Cups is, what can our community do for you?
Invest. Honestly, if we had money, right? If we didn't have to completely rely on being self-sourced.
So I've had this in the back of my mind to ask this, but I wasn't sure, but you brought it up.
Yes.
What do you value your company at right now?
You know, it's difficult.
Establish you're willing to give up some equity.
I think that we had valuation discussions with our old partner, and we structured kind of this whole settlement thing with him where he wasn't, we were fortunate enough that we're still in amicable terms, and he didn't actually pull any equity out. He just wanted what was left of his initial investment. And so at the time, we looked at current valuation at somewhere between $700,000 and $1.4 million. And that's based on current sales along with realistic expectation for growth, both domestically and internationally.
And if someone was to invest, would you use some of that money to make the product here?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. We're already making the product here.
All the component parts are made domestically. We don't, I'm not into having things made in China and shipped back here. I want to be able to control, again, we're not making 1 million units a year. I want to be able to tightly control the quality because it's a precision test device.
With the exception of maybe the handle, and I don't know the source of that, but the main components. So this body here, we have a machine shop out in Lansing, Illinois that makes all that.
Right.
The electronics in here, the boards are printed at a PCB manufacturer up in...
Upstate New York.
No, not upstate New York. Where's Sal at? He's right off of
Oh, Park Ridge.
355
Park Ridge.
355 in
Yeah.
North Avenue, and all the assembly work is done out in Elton, right? So 95% of the cost of this, and the Pelican cases come out of California. So 95% of the content is domestically sourced, and just about everything on here is sourced within 50 miles.
Of here, yeah.
Okay, guys, I want to thank you for presenting it. I think you guys did a great job. One last sweep of the room. Any last comments, questions? All right, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Mont.
Thank you very much.
Sorry we ran late. Oops.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank again our sponsors. We have Lori Felt here from ISBDC, along with Ken. We have Jim and Debbie from WJOB. Who am I missing? Oh, myself from Commercialization Manufacturing Excellence Center. And of course, we cannot do this without Jeff and his wife from Coffee Cabin. So thank you everybody for coffee.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because it's all about regional, right? Bring jobs into the area.